Well, good afternoon. Special good afternoon to my brothers and sisters from the Army ROTC program, and of course you from the service academies as well. And so we're good to be here. I am a combat veteran of Vietnam. My time was after these older men that you see to my left, 1969 to 1970 in Vietnam and in Cambodia as an infantry platoon leader. So our program here this afternoon is going to carry us back to the Central Highlands of Vietnam in the Drang Valley in mid-November 1965. 1965. We have assembled here today 5 1st Cavalry Division combat veterans who were involved in the first major battle in that valley between the American forces and the North Vietnamese Army. Their exploits in that battle are celebrated in the book We Were Soldiers Once and Young, written by the commander, General Hal Moore, and co-author Joe Galloway, in the subsequent movie We Were Soldiers Once and Young, where Mel Gibson played the leading role as Lieutenant Colonel Moore. Before we go there, before we go to the Ia Drang Valley, let's go nearby to Bong Son, Camp Bong Son, and Paris Davis, Colonel retired, was a Special Forces officer in a camp near Bong Son. An engagement that's going to take place just a few months before we go into the Ia Drang Valley with the 1st Cav. Paris is a 1959 graduate, commissioned from the ROTC program at Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. He graduated from both Airborne and Ranger School, and he is Special Forces qualified. And he served as commander of an Alpha team of the Special Forces in Vietnam, at which time there's a significant battle near Camp Bong Son in which he is going to lead not only his soldiers of his A team, but the South Vietnamese soldiers that they are advising in a major combat in which Paris is going to succeed in rescuing a number of his wounded comrades. And his action, to include himself being wounded, is going to result in the award of a Silver Star. Years later, that action is going to be reviewed, and his merit in that engagement will be upgraded, and just this past year, Paris was awarded the Medal of Honor for his actions at Bong Son. So Paris, in just a few minutes, would you please, Colonel, tell us a little bit about what happened?
Okay.
You got your mic on here, I think.
I hope
That's all
I
right.
have.
Go ahead.
This will only take a few minutes. My name is Paris Davis. I attended Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I served in Vietnam three times. I won the Medal of Honor, or was awarded the Medal of Honor on my second tour there. I really enjoyed being in the military. I think it's a very great place to be. In the war itself, I'm glad it is over and we're all back here together. And thanks for allowing me to be an American and talk to you right now about all the great things that the military has done. Please stay well, enjoy yourself, and thank you.
Well, thank you, Colonel, for those remarks, and it's great, and it's an honor to have you here with our team this afternoon. So let's introduce that team. And next slide, please. There should be another one. There you go. So here's our lads that are going to be here this afternoon, testifying to what happened in the battle. From 1st to the 7th Cavalry, we have Operations Officer, that's the S3, Captain Greg Matt Dillon. Matt Dillon, Operations Officer. John Herron, a company commander. Joe Marm, a platoon leader. And also a Medal of Honor recipient for his actions in the battle. We have Bob Edwards, who is company commander, and we have Bud Alley, who was communications officer for 2nd Battalion of the 7th Cav. Did I leave anybody out? Got you all covered down? All right, so next slide. 1st Cavalry Division will be activated in 1965. They have, this division has been training at Fort Benning, Georgia, in a new concept of warfare called air mobile operations. And President Johnson will determine in mid-65 that we need the air mobile division to go to Vietnam. And they will go to Vietnam. The goal is to go to Vietnam the same way their fathers did in World War II, and that's by ship. And you can see there on the slides, you can see we've got aircraft carriers carrying helicopters. We got troop ships carrying troops. These guys will tell you stories of the first receipt of their M16 rifles shooting at targets as the ships are going across the ocean to Vietnam, and we got sleds behind the ships pulling targets which are familiarizing themselves with their new weapons. Significant, isn't it? So they're going to arrive in Vietnam. Next slide. They're going to arrive there, and immediately they're going to go in country, into the interior. 101st Airborne had been in the area and is still in the area, and the 1st Cav Division is going to join them. And then the 1st Battalion, 7th Cav, will be given a mission to conduct an operation in the Ia Drang Valley. So Matt Dillon, you're the operations officer for that battalion. Tell us a little bit about that. You can sit right there. I think your mic's good.
I want to stand.
You going to stand? All right, brother?
Yeah, I want to stand. Yeah.
We do have.
When we arrived in Vietnam aboard the Manish Rose troop ship after a 30-day trip all the way from Charleston, South Carolina, through the Panama Canal, across the Pacific. And the only thing of significance we did the whole time was we painted a 1st Cav patch on the smokestack of the ship. We then unloaded, and either by helicopter or truck, we moved from Quy Nhon up to An Khê, which is about 15 miles, and occupied a log lodge spot in the jungle that was referred to as the golf course, because we were cleaning it off by hand for 400 helicopters that the 1st Cav had. The battalion spent most of its time erecting a tent city and conducting small unit operations around the An Khê area. Not really any major contacts. On the 9th of November, we received a warning order that we would be moved to the Pleiku area, which was about 15 more miles up Highway 19. The brigade at the time consisted of the 1st of the 7th Cav, 2nd of the 7th Cav, and the 2nd of the 5th Cav, all under Colonel Brown as the brigade commander. We conducted for about 3 days some meaningless operations east of the Plaimee Special Forces Camp, which was the area that was attacked by the NBA about 2 weeks before. After some discussions with Colonel Moore, myself, Colonel Brown, and General Knowles, we decided that we needed to do our operations west of the Plaimee Special Forces Camp. And he said, well, we'll get permission to do that. I'm all for it. So he said, I'll let you know. So that evening, he came and visited our headquarters, and he said, okay, we're going to make a long thrust into the Ia Drang Valley. And Colonel Brown handed me a map with a big blue goose egg on it, just to the southeast of Chupong Mountain, and he said, pick out a spot. So I spent a good part of that day looking at the map, the topographic map, looking for a landing zone.
Next slide. I'm sorry.
And we needed a spot large enough for 16 helicopters. Well, we couldn't find one that large, but we did locate 2 that looked like they would take 8 helicopters at a time. One was I named X-ray, and the other one I named Tango. We planned to make a reconnaissance by air the next morning to determine if that was the final decision, which one. So spent the rest of the day writing up the operations plan. Very simple: B company first, A company second, C company third, D company last. And I put that together, and we decided to all lay down and take a nap before the next day, because we probably wouldn't get much sleep for the next 3 or 4 days. About midnight, the lieutenant with the ASA intercept team came and woke me up, and he said, "I had an interest in intercept." I said, "Oh, well, what was interesting about it?" He said it was, appeared to be a situation report where you do line one is, and then you put in that, whether the personnel strength or vehicles, what the numbers, but it was all encrypted in Chinese Mandarin. And he said our higher headquarters thinks that there's probably a Chinese advisor with each North Vietnamese regiment. So, oh, okay. I said, well, is that the significant? He said, oh, no, the most important thing is standing right where we are, the intercept was on a line straight into the foothills of Chupang Mountain. So I thought, well, they go almost right over X-ray. Well, I thought, well, I won't wake up more and tell them now. I'll wait till morning. I wake up about 5:30. I walk down. I said, I have some news for you. And I told him about the intercept. And he said, well, at least we're probably not going to find a dry hole there. So Bruce Crandall, the helicopter commander, came in, and we got on a couple of choppers, flew down about 20 miles south of the Chupang Mountain to make it look like a resupply helicopter mission. We flew straight across the Drang Valley to the Dak Ho Special Forces Camp, which is on the north side of the goose egg that I had. Spent a few minutes there, and then like we were unloaded, we flew back to Play Me. And at that time, Moore gave out the order to the company commanders, all the supporting people, and we established 10:30 as the liftoff time. Well, we were going to have 16 choppers. We had 3 artillery batteries, had a platoon of AR rocket ships, and then the gunships attached to the normal helicopter company. And 10:30 came. The artillery had not yet got into full position to fire the prep, so we were about 10 minutes late taking off. The idea was they would fire a prep for 15 minutes, and then when the helicopters were 1 minute out, Bruce Crandall would call me and say, 1 minute, and then we would cease fire with the artillery, and then the 4 rocket ships would take up the prep, firing 24 rockets each into the perimeter of the LZ, followed by the lift ships who had machine guns and they fired into the outstretches of the LZ, and then the lift ships were all going to land, and which they did, and that was followed at that time by John Herron and B Company.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah.
All right, Bravo Company Commander. Bravo Company Commander John Herron, pick up the storyline.
Right. Colonel Dillon is 90 years old and has a handicap of 5 in golf. Anyway, I had the first company going into LZ X-ray. And I had commanded my company for over a year and a half. I had taken them through air assault training. I knew the platoon sergeants. I knew the squad leaders. I knew a lot of the men very well. They were a good outfit. Shortly before we went to Vietnam, we got 3 brand new lieutenants in, 2 of them out of Airborne Rangers School. And I got them together and I said, listen to your platoon sergeants, and they'll teach you how to be a good platoon leader. 2 of them did that. 1 of them didn't. And he was a very aggressive lieutenant, which I liked, but he and his platoon sergeant didn't get along. So we got into X-ray, and Colonel Moore had me securing the LZ, which I did, and then we captured an NVA soldier, and he said there were lots of North Vietnamese up there in the Chupong Mountain, which overlooked us. They want to kill Americans. And Colonel Moore got that message and said, okay, John, take your whole company and move towards the Chupong Mountain, which was, obviously, he wanted to make contact with the enemy before they made contact with us on the LZ. He needed to keep that LZ open. So off we went. And it wasn't very long after that before I stopped because I was having problems with communication with the terrain and all. It was difficult. Although I had Matt Dillon up there flying around, and that helped. And the regressive lieutenant called me and said, I see 3 or 4 NVAs up in here in the woods, and I'm gonna go get them. I said, okay. But I didn't realize he'd take his whole platoon and run, really run, towards these 4 guys. And next thing I knew, he said, we're in heavy contact, we're taking casualties, and I think I've been cut off. And I said, grab a piece of terrain and defend it. And he did that with the help of a sergeant who happened to be the weapons squad leader and covered his fire and then was overrun by the North Vietnamese. The next thing that happened was Sergeant Savage, who was a squad leader, called me and said, we're in heavy contact, the platoon leader's been killed, the platoon sergeant's been killed, the forward air observer, sergeant with this has been wounded, and he said, I got to get some artillery fire in here and mortar fire. And so I said to Sergeant Savage, I'll get my FO, my forward observer, who was with me, to start calling in fires. And he did that. What he did was he marked different fires around his platoon. We didn't know the exact coordinates. So whenever the North Vietnamese would attack through his platoon, he'd call these fires in. And he did that all afternoon and all evening because, as Joe Marn will tell you later on, we made 3 different attempts to get to that platoon. And every time we did it, they were in there solid. They were in the trees. They had gotten really great fire positions, and we just took a lot of casualties trying to get them. And so the next day, I told Sergeant Savage that before night fell, I said, we can't get to you. And, you know, that was a terrible morale problem for the platoon. But we had a medic up there who was crawling around, keeping the hopes up and passing out water. We had guys that were still fighting. And so we got them the next morning. It took my company and a reinforcing company from the 5th Cav. And it took my whole company to carry my wounded and killed back. So that was my basic fighting in the Drang Valley. It was the first day and part of the second. Okay.
Thank you, John.
I'll turn it
John
over
mentioned
to
Joe Marm,
Joe
platoon
Marm.
leader, 2nd Lieutenant Joe Marm.
It's an
What's
honor
your
for me
story?
to be here. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I was in Ranger School, my best preparation for Vietnam. I went through basic training, advanced individual training, then 6 months of OCS, and then 9 weeks of Ranger School. Fresh out of college, I would have been, I joined the Army 5 days after I graduated, took my first train ride from Pittsburgh down to Fort Jackson, South Carolina. I got off of the train and I asked the drill sergeant, where's the bathroom? He says, we don't have bathrooms in the Army soldier, we have latrines. So I learned very quickly to watch what you say to the drill sergeants. But they were great leaders and great instructors, and the same with my OCS unit. But they needed lieutenants for the 1st Cav that was forming up at Fort Benning in Ranger School down in Florida. So they called out about 50 names and said, your order's now being changed. You're going to go to this unit up in Fort Benning. and the rumor had it, it wasn't official yet, but they were heading to Vietnam. So we went up there in August, and a month later we were on our merchant marine ship to USS Maurice Rose to Vietnam. All the troops went over on merchant marine ships, and the helicopters went over on aircraft carriers. So it was a great, we were on that ship for 30 days, and like you said, we were shooting off the tail of the ship because the M16 was a brand new weapon. I took my basic training with the M1, the advanced individual training with the M14, and then OCS with the M16. So, but it was a very good weapon, and proved to be a very, very successful weapon. We had, as a platoon leader, you know, we had the M60 machine gun and the M79 grenade launcher, which was a very fine weapon too. And we didn't have, we had, they're called light anti-tank weapon, a LAW, that's the acronym, LAW. It was a bazooka tank killing weapon, a very, very good weapon. In my battle, when I went in there, we were trying to get to that platoon. We made the first attempt just with our company, and it wasn't successful. So we came back, and we were going to make a second attempt, but it was starting to get dark. But as we made that second attempt, it was when my action happened. You think of Vietnam as heavy jungle. It wasn't. It was elephant grass and trees and shrubs, not heavy jungle. And right in front of my position was a solidified rock anthill about 7 feet tall with trees and shrubs all around it. And so as we were moving forward, this one position was holding up my platoon. So I had one of my men take this lead anti-tank weapon and shoot it into that position. But it didn't work for him because of all the humidity and rain we were getting. It didn't go off for him. So I took the weapon from him, and I closed it up and opened back up, and it went off for me, and I thought we destroyed that position. So we started moving forward again, and we're getting more fire from the trees and the shrubs around that position. And so I had one of my men using, with all the battle noise, I told him to run up there and throw a grenade over the top, kind of using sign language. And he thought I meant throw it from where we're at, so that's what he did, and it deflected and landed in front and didn't do any damage. So rather than waste any more time because it was starting to get dark, I told my men to hold their fire and don't shoot me up. I ran across from here to the end of the room here and threw a grenade over the top of the position, went around to the left side, and then shot some more guys that were trying to shoot me. After I silenced the bunker, I told my men to come on, let's go. We got to get to that platoon before it gets too dark. And someone further in the back, I was standing up, shot me in the jaw, kind of ruined my day. And it deflected downward and out my right side, underneath my right jaw. And so it was and I had Bruce Crandall or Ed Freeman, the two helicopter pilots that also earned the Medal of Honor. It's the only Army battle in Vietnam where there were 3 recipients of the Medal of Honor. And so I'm very thankful for one of them taking me back and taking to an aid station back in the rear. But it was a very tremendous battle. We thought we were outnumbered 7-1. They had about 3,000 enemy soldiers. We only had about 450 in the 1st Cav Division of 1-7. Now 1-7's lineage goes back to Custer, and we thought we were in another little bighorn, surrounded and outnumbered. But we had a lot of assets Custer didn't have. We had all the fast movers from the different services providing close air support for us. We had a B-52 strike the second day, and so we had just tremendous support. Plus more ground troops were coming in too. But it's just an awesome battle. After 3 days of intense fighting, that 450, we had 79 of our soldiers were killed in action, and about 121 were wounded. And I was one of the wounded. And Tom mentioned the book, We Were Soldiers Once and Young. There's a new book out that it's being on sale out there. Bud Alley wrote it, called Ghosts in the Green Grass. And one just came out in January called 3 Days in Hell. They mentioned the that first captured of the NVA was this guy, Ron Barrows, who wrote the book called 3 Days in Hell. It's a pretty good book. They're all very, very special. The book came out, We Were Soldiers, Once and Young came out in 92. 10 years later, the movie came out, and they had to cut it down to fit on the marquee to We Were Soldiers. And the book is written by the battalion commander and the only embedded reporter. You mentioned his name, Joe Galloway. He was the only reporter in that battle. He came in the night of the first night on the 14th, and the next morning he was laying flat on his belly trying to stay away from all the bullets that were flying around. Sergeant Major Plumley came up to him and kicked him in the stomach with his size 12 combat boots and said, "Sonny, you can't take any more pictures down there. Get up and start recording the battle." And so that's what Joe Galloway did, and did a very good job with the book. But it's just an honor for me to be here. I'd like to thank you for all you're doing. You can be anything you want to be in America. We're the greatest country in the world because of our military. God bless you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Now it's time to get Charlie Company in the fight. I got just the man to do it. I want to warn you. Fasten your seat belts. Bob Edwards, you're up.
Thank you. He'll call me Bob Edwards. You can call me Captain Edwards. You can call me Colonel Edwards. But what I prefer is that you call me by this call sign I had for 19 months as a company commander, Hot Wire 6. Now, if that isn't the best description of me in some of my actions, I don't know what it would be. The guy sitting here, we don't have enough time to tell you the real story behind the Battle of LG X-Ray. My goal is to get you to read the book, if you haven't. Don't tell me you saw the movie, because I am not a movie fan. Moore and Galloway took 8 years to write that book. And most of that time was spent going around and finding veterans and interviewing them and telling a portion of their story in the book. The other thing I'll tell you is, we're not going to have time for many questions. But we love to talk to cadets and young officer-to-be. So you see us wandering around or you see us at the bar, stop us, and we will talk to you and answer your questions. C Company, third company in. Thanks to John and Tony Nadal, who's not here, A and B Company, the enemy was a little pissed off. We could not land. We came to a hover, maybe 3-4 feet off the ground, and we jumped out. That was something we had done in training. Another thing we had done in training was Colonel Moore would identify a squad leader or a platoon leader or a company commander as you were killed in action and wait to see who took over. That training permitted E5 Ernie Savage to go from squad leader to platoon leader with that cut-off platoon. After he took command of that platoon, there were no more casualties, and they had a medic with him. And that medic quickly ran out of his supplies. He was plugging bullet holes with C-ration toilet paper, a wad of paper like that. He got all the wounded through the night. Both of those guys came out with a Distinguished Service Cross. All right, jump out of the airplane. Fortunately, I had most of my company with me. Moore grabbed me and said, "Forget the original plan. You take the company and now run and block to the south and southwest." We did, and about 20 minutes later, I had 3 platoons online. A large enemy force hit us. And I want to quote what Moore wrote about that force, and forgive me if I read it. "The North Vietnamese regulars were good, but Charlie Company was cutting them down with fire that swept through the tall elephant grass. Bob Edwards and his thin green line where I get a little choked up on some of this stuff. We're stopping the most serious event of the afternoon. We defeated that event. We finally got a reinforcing company in. Moore finally got a 360-degree perimeter just as darkness was falling. There were some attempted enemy attacks during the night, but they were small. We fought them off. We all fought them off. Early the next morning, Moore got on a command net, called the company commanders and said, I want each of you to send a small patrol out and see what's out front. And then I want you to meet me at the C Company command post, and we're going to figure out how to get that Ernie Savage. Passed that order down. Platoon leaders and small patrols went out. Very quickly, the front erupted. I had a reinforcing platoon join me late the other evening. I had now 4 platoons online. I got on the radio. My 2 right flank platoon leaders reported they were back in position. There were heavy enemy attack, but they were holding. Unfortunately, the 2 left platoons took the brunt of a very large enemy attack. They didn't answer, probably because they were dead by that time. After 2.5 hours of very savage fighting, the enemy finally withdrew. They beat the shit out of my company, but we held. And that's why we want you to read the book. Read about the men that survived, but most importantly, the ones that we lost. Thank you.
Next slide. And the next. It shows you the engagement of Charlie Company and Bob.
You want me to go to George's part?
Hang on, brother. Next slide. All right. Mid-morning on the 3rd day of the battle, the 17th of November, 1-7 Cav was ordered out of the action. And reinforcements came into landing zone X-ray from 2nd Battalion, 7th Cav, 2nd Battalion, 5th Cavalry. And they will be in position on the landing zone as 1st to the 7th Cav leaves. The next day, those at higher headquarters determined that what was needed in the fight, apart from the infantry, was, if you will, close air support by B-52 bombers. So there's a minimum safe area when you got something like that coming in to bomb just in front of your lines. So it's time to evacuate 2-7 Cav, 2-5 Cav away from the LZ X-ray. And they're ordered to march 4 kilometers to the northeast to LZ Columbus and LZ Albany. 2-7 Cav will go to Albany. So Bob, you want to get that started, and Bud, you can finish up.
Thank you, sir. I'm Bud Alley, and I was a 2nd lieutenant. I was a U-2 lieutenant. I went in from ROTC directly to take over a platoon in the 2nd Infantry Division as a platoon leader with no OIBC and no infantry training whatsoever. So for you cadets, just wanted to let you know that stay awake out there in those classes. Now, 17 November 1965, it's morning, it's hot as hell. We haven't slept in 2 nights, obviously. We were waiting on an attack that never came, and then we're ordered to march off. Enemy situation, we were told enemy had left the area. They had gone back to Cambodia. There were none in the area. You've got 3.5 hours to go, 7 clicks through the unknown jungle that you've not reconned whatsoever. You're out of water, you're low on ammo, but there's a lot of detritus left on the battlefield from the 1st to the 7th. So as a headquarters company guy, I was a staff officer. So we had a lot of headquarters guys out there who were not really combatants. We had some cooks, we had some truck drivers, we had some wiremen, we had a few radio repairmen. We had guys that really hadn't held a rifle in almost 2 years and had had no training as a unit, and off we go headed, following the man in front in a column of two in single file, separated by about 100 yards between us through the jungle, which means you really couldn't see what was on your left or what was on your right. On the western side of the column were the captains. There was Captain Dan Boone, our company commander, Captain Bill Shukart, our battalion surgeon, Captain Roger Knopf, our forward air controller, and Captain Harold McCarn, who was our S4 officer, along with platoon sergeants. To the eastern side of the column are two untrained second lieutenants, Lieutenant John Howard, medical service corps officer, and myself, battalion communication officer. And we've got kind of a gaggle of men. And I asked the company commander, what happens if we had something happen? He said, just push forward into Charlie Company, they will take care of you. So here we go. We're all through the jungle, it's hot, we're out of water, we're carrying extra stuff. I think I was carrying a 292 radio antenna. And by the way, as communication officer at headquarters company, I was not TO&E a radio, so I had no radio communication. Nor did my company commander have a radio because he was not authorized one. So we had no way of communicating. I'm 23 years old, I'm untrained, I'm 10,000 miles away from home, it's hot as hell, and off we go. Follow the man in front of you. And we went, and we went. And it was elephant grass, it was triple canopy jungle, it was a mess. Just follow the man in front of you. Finally, the battalion stops. Stops totally. Sits there about 15 minutes. We're smoking and joking and kind of think, well, we must be there. There must be somebody up front. Word comes back verbally through the guys. Oh, they found a couple of NVA up front up there. Oh, really? Yeah, they must be escaped from the other battle. Oh, really? Okay. So they're having to parlay. We have a new battalion CEO who's just taken over about a week before, who doesn't know what a landing zone looks like. So he takes off, wandering away while the interrogation is going on, looking for a landing zone. He spots an area. He calls up the executive officer, who was new, been there a week, calls up, now let's call the company commanders forward and to figure out who's going to be in charge of what area of this little landing zone. And about that time is when recon had crossed the little opening area. And way back, about almost a half mile back, I heard some popping. Sounded like firecrackers. Bang, 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 bang. Word very quickly came back, oh, Charlie, by the way, there's an ambush up front. Charlie Company, move on line, and we're going to roll up the edge of this L-shaped ambush. So Charlie Company takes over as the firing comes back between us. What had happened was the NVA was in between the two columns. We had a full regiment of the 1st of the 33rd North Vietnamese Regiment was kind of between us and on the eastern flank. They cut us off behind from headquarters. So Captain George Forrest was behind us. He was able to get his company organized. The rest of the leadership was all forward. So back on my side of the landing zone.
Next slide. Sorry, bud.
Okay.
Drive on, brother.
So here we got two lieutenants, second lieutenants, and the screaming starts. Medic, medic, medic. So John Howard takes off with his medics moving forward, and they start trying to triage what they could. I pushed my guys forward up into Charlie Company as best we could, and the fight was on, and it lasted all afternoon and all down to evening. I didn't know where to go, how to go, anything. No compass, no directions. I finally got a radio that worked. I called somebody up top, the XO. He said, we got our hands full up here, do the best you can. Well, men were dying all around us, and finally, in late afternoon, I was able to find a pile of wounded Americans that were, one of them was dead, one of them was badly wounded. I happened to know him. I held him in his arms. I had nothing to do for him, nothing to give him, no way to help him other than to hold him in my arms till he died. I'm 23 years old. I'm 10,000 miles away from home. I want my mama. I am really getting worried now. So I continued to look around, and I stumbled into the dark, into a little ditch. And there are 5 wounded GIs in there. I do not know them. They're wounded badly. They're crying. They said, Lieutenant, They recognized I did have a bar on. You got to save us. I don't know I don't know where we're supposed to go. Don't know how I'm supposed to do it. But I heard the artillery firing from 2 miles away, and I said, the only prayer we got is if we can make an E&E up through the enemy and probably get back into the friendly lines. So for somewhere around 6 to 8 hours, I managed to get those 5 men up to the exterior of the perimeter of the artillery base, Charlie Company. The next morning, I was able to get them all in.
Okay, Bud. Sorry, we gotta wrap it up.
That was my story.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. That's their story in their words. They have more to tell you. Please feel free to stop these fellows out here in the hallway or wherever. Ask them questions. They'll provide you some good information. Ladies and gentlemen, they were soldiers once and young.